Hello everyone. Welcome to this week. Hope you had a great Halloween. I hope you got lots of candy, including the best candy that has ever been created. That is the almond joy, as many of you know. And you are free to disagree with me, and you would be wrong, and that's okay. You're allowed to be wrong. I do not fault you for being wrong. You are allowed to be that. But almond joy is definitively the best candy. And why there are not more in the little like mix bags, I do not know. I got my own bag of almond joys because I am gluttonous. But then I also got like the mixed bag for everybody else, and there's only like one almond joy in the entire bag, and I think that that's not fair. And yes, I took it. So I hope you had a great Halloween. We certainly did. It was great. Had an enjoyable time, and so I hope you did too. So this week we're going to talk about treatment modalities to kind of start to introduce you to what how to treat some of this stuff. And again, we're not going to fully learn how to do them, but I am going to introduce you to them so that you are informed on some of the best skills and techniques that we can use um, to treat substance use disorder. Now, again, these are therapeutic modalities. Going through this does not mean you are certified in them, and going through this does not mean that you know, have the training necessary to implement them, depending on what you want to do. But when you hear about them in the future, you will know what they are, and that's kind of what the point of the class is. So we're going to talk about motivational interviewing, and we're going to talk about dialectical behavioral therapy today. And both of those are really effective, but not only with behavioral health, which is not the focus of this class, but what is part of substance use disorder treatment, but also with substance use disorder. So the things here, if you haven't already started on your paper, you know, or if you haven't put in the prompt to Chat GPT to, you know, write your paper for you, um, then this will kind of give you some background as to what some of these modalities are. And so, the stuff we talk about here is not going to be sufficient for your paper. You'll still need to do an additional deep dive and a few extra things, but it'll at least give you a starting point as to how to do your research. Okay. But first, before we get there, I do want to talk about a little something kind of heavier. So this is a personal story. So if this is something that like, okay, I'm not really here for this, I want to just get to the content, you can scrub forward a little bit when you see the slides change, then you'll know, okay, it's he's moving on. But I do want to take a little bit of time because November is Suicide Prevention Month, Suicide Awareness Month, and I want to just talk a little bit about that because even those of us that know this stuff can have a hard time with suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts. You know, I grew up thinking that it wasn't okay to be okay, or I'm sorry, it wasn't okay to be not okay, or to not be okay. I did not know that. I thought that part of being an adult is that you are fine 100% of the time. I did not know that it was okay to admit that you're struggling. I did not know that it was okay to acknowledge that things are not going really well. Because whenever I would do that growing up, it was met with shame talk. Well, you're just not doing enough. You're smarter than this. You're better than this, or you need to go to church. Like that. That was all. Those were always the solutions. And so growing up, I just kind of went through it, and I never really acknowledged the struggles that I was going through because if I did, they were minimized or they were shamed. And so as I got out of college and moved up here, trying to implement that mentality into what, you know, this field, but also this area selects for did not go really well. And so I moved up here in May of 2011 to Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati. And and then had some roommates and got started, you know, in my career. And then one roommate decided to move to Atlanta, and another roommate decided to get married, and so I was living on my own. I was living on my own in Beachmont, and in a basement of a 6 unit apartment complex, and it was a dump, but it was $500 a month, and when you're not making a ton of money, that $500 goes a long way. That and I would kill to go back to that now, but that's beside the point. So anyway, I had gone through some relationship stuff. I felt really alone. I was going through some stuff at work. I was drinking a little bit more than I probably should have. I don't identify as being in recovery, and I don't identify as, um, but I did. I can't acknowledge that I was drinking probably a little bit more than I should have, and I got really overwhelmed. I started feeling a lot of the pressure. The relationship stuff that I was going through was really toxic all the way around, and living by myself, and I knew that I couldn't really reach out to my parents because they didn't really understand or didn't show any interest in understanding. Um, and so I reached a point on November the 6th, 2012. It was a Tuesday, that I just kind of decided I don't want to be here anymore. Um, and so I had a couple of things to do on the 7th from the patients that I was working with at the time on the job. I was able to work out in the field. And I wanted, if I'm going to end my life, I want to make sure that I kind of close up all the things I needed to close up with, my job. So that night I wrote my goodbye letters. And November 7th, I had my plan, I had my means, and I certainly had my intent. And I I texted someone a goodbye note, and I don't know if it was them, but someone called the Cincinnati Police Department, and I had to swing by my office real quick because that was the last stop before I went to go make my last stop before I went home. And when I got back to my office, there were three members of the Cincinnati Police Department waiting for me, and my last day at that job was being escorted out in handcuffs from the fourth floor, because that's standard protocol, I guess, and put in the back of a police car and taken for treatment, which I received, and I'm very thankful for them at Deaconess in Cincinnati. And then I really started to do a lot of work. I really started to do a lot of work with myself, with repair, with learning more about who I am and what is meaningful to me, about breaking away from some old patterns that were showing up, that relationship wounds and attachment wounds that were really causing a lot of what I was feeling, and influenced it a lot. And and so uh, things got better, because I had a path, and I had a lifeline, and I was able to find myself for the first time, and that was good. And then from there, I kind of spent, when you I worked out a deal where I was let go from that company. Um, but So I spent kind of 2 or 3 months in the wilderness trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And then eventually I ended up at North Key, where my therapy career took off, and now here I am, almost 13 years later, uh, and it sounds so weird to say, almost 13 years later, and things are much better. things are good, and they've been good for a while. And so I go through all of this to tell you that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to go through hard times. It's okay, and there's nothing wrong with you because you're experiencing them. It's also okay to ask for help, and you never know where you might find help. But it's okay to not be okay. You are not broken. I believe that personally, but also professionally. I get a lot of patients who come in and they tell me that they're broken. You're not broken. You are enough just as you are. Sometimes it's hard for us to see that though, especially when things get messy. Certainly with the world the way that it is, and the amount of just stimulation that we're getting at all times can make it feel as though we're not okay. And there are times that it's okay to not be okay. But you do have people that are around you that love you, that care about you, that want you here. Life is better with you here. And I say that, some of you may be struggling, may have loved ones that are struggling. That's okay. Help is available. Get them to someone that will talk to them. Get yourself to someone that can talk to you. Certainly, being a student, you have access to NKU's counseling resources, but also reach out to me. I won't be your therapist unless you're not my student, but but I can get you connected to resources that can help you. So don't be afraid to take time for you. Don't be afraid to take care of you. Don't be afraid to explore some of these things that you're feeling. Okay. Because it's okay to not be okay. Help is out there. If you're thinking about suicide, I empathize. If there have ever been thoughts, or you have loved ones, or you ever go through, I empathize. It feels like a way out. Something that I call out with my patients is sometimes, suicide's not an option. Well, the reality is unfortunately suicide is an option, and it's an option that can be appealing when you feel like you have no way out. And so I will never sit there and suicide's not an option. No, I get it. It's there. It's present. Um, but I have patients make a promise to me that they will try to talk to one person before they make that decision. Now, how much of that matters, how much of that, is binding, that's at the discretion of the patient, right? Like, it's not legally binding, obviously, but it can be something to help give them a sense that someone cares about them, because we do. I've lost 3 patients to suicide. I've lost 8 to overdose, and every one of them sucks, and they still suck. I sometimes will pass by, when I was working in the field. I will sometimes pass by areas where I knew that I had a patient that passed away from suicide, and it sucks. It sucks, you know. So help is out there. You matter. You're not alone. Here are some warning signs, because it can sometimes be pretty subtle. But that was just a little thing. Even as you go out into this field, wherever you go, this field can do some stuff to you that will really challenge you. And it's okay to struggle. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not do everything perfect. So keep that in mind, and people care about you. So reach out if you need someone to chat with, if you need resources, or you need connection. But as I said, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to sit in the struggle. It's okay to sit in the mud. And sometimes you just want someone to sit in there with you and tell you that it kind of sucks, because it does. But you're stronger than you think. So keep that in mind. All right, cool. Enough heavy stuff. Let's talk about treatment. So we're going to go over 2 or 3 treatment modalities over the next few weeks. We'll talk about support groups, how they can help, AA, Celebrate Recovery, etc. Again, these are going to be super high level discussions. We won't get into the actual application, but it'll just be on introducing you to these concepts. And They may help you on your paper that's due in a few weeks. Don't forget about that. Okay. So today we're going to cover DBT and motivational interviewing, which we talked about before. So let's talk about DBT big picture. Some of you are Hallmark movie people, right? And if you are, good for you. Here's the thing. They're all the same. Fundamentally, you know that, but let me just break it down for you. Country girl moves to the big city to become a lawyer in New York or big city, wherever they are, right? And so as she is working in her independent big city job, big girl job, she gets a call from her mom, and Mr. McGillicuddy's Christmas tree farm is about to go under, and she needs to come and use her special lawyer abilities to help save the farm. And so she gets there. She goes back home, and she goes to Mr. McGillicuddy's Christmas tree farm, and wouldn't you know it, who is working behind the counter but that handsome guy from high school that was kind of a dick to her back then, and they kind of had a thing, but then he was a jerk. And so then she decided that she didn't want to be with him, but he's really hot because he's wearing a too tight t-shirt working at Mr. McGillicuddy's Christmas tree farm in the middle of December. Why are you not wearing appropriately weathered clothing, sir? Anyway, they still have this kind of like underlying Hallmark movie sexual tension between them, but he's a jerk and she wants nothing to do with him. And he looks at her like, why'd you move away? Too good for this town, big city girl. And so she decides, well, okay, he's no help, so let me go and I'll have a bake sale. And she has a bake sale or an art show or a theater production or a fundraiser, some kind of generic thing, and to raise money to save the Christmas tree farm. Well, unfortunately, she runs a little bit short. And on the final day of when the money is due, lo and behold, a check that for the exact amount of money that she needs to save the Christmas tree farm comes in. And who did it? But it's the dad of the douchebag from high school that I was talking about earlier. He's an investment banker in some other big city, and he saves the farm, and they have this moment where they decide that they actually do love one another, and she decides that that the country is where she belonged all along. That's every Hallmark movie. And you can cut and paste that for any season. In the fall, it's a jack-o'-lantern. In the it's a pumpkin farm, pumpkin patch. In the spring, it's a flower shop. In the summer, it's like a beach. But they're all the same. As you can even see, here are several of them. Aren't they all the same? Conventionally attractive girl in red, mostly handsome guy in green, and a dog for some of them. Actually, just one of them, but there's others that there's probably a dog. Anyway, they're all the same. And Danica McKellar is, Winnie Cooper is here. But anyway, all of the men have very square jaws and like a rectangular face, and they're layered in sweaters. Isn't that neat? Right? They're all the same, and you know that, but they still make you feel good inside. That is dialectical behavioral therapy in a nutshell, right? So, dialectical behavioral therapy says we have two parts of our brain. We have our rational mind, we have our emotional mind, okay? Now, our emotional mind is our Crayola crayon box by which we color our world, right? Some people get like the standard 8-pack. They have a very small range of emotion. Other people have a very wide range. They have like the 256 count, a little case with a little pencil sharpener on the side. And so they have this big, wide range of emotions, big emotions, right? And decisions are oftentimes made based on those big emotions. But that can be a problem because if you've ever had kids, you can know that whatever emotion that they're feeling at the time is not always congruent with the situation at hand. I'm sorry that you can't find that, like, I put your favorite toy under a box and you don't have object permanence. And now you think that thing is gone forever. And oh my God! And it's the worst thing in the world, right? Not really congruent, but we do that sometimes, right? We do that even as adults. So our thought and our focus is only on our emotion. We oftentimes get reactive or somewhat defensive, and then we get a little bit, if somebody tries to provide logic to us in a situation, it doesn't always stick because we're so big into our emotional mind. Okay? Now, let's go to the other side, right? As I mentioned to you with the Hallmark movies, they're all the same, right? I can logically break all of that down, and I can tell you all of the beats that go along with it. I had My daughter's mom was and I guess probably still is really big into these movies, and I would and whenever she would watch them, there would be that initial tension between the high school douchebag and the main character. And I would say, "Oh, I wonder if they're going to end up together." And she would say, "Shut up, Jordan," because they always do. They're all the same, and you know that. But that doesn't take away from the emotion that you can feel. So with rational mind, that is so logical. It's very rigid. It's what is practical. We're focused on facts, right? And it suppresses or even outright ignores the emotional experience that we can have. Now, in some cases, that's very good. If I'm trying to problem solve, that's important. But if I'm trying to connect with someone, or I'm trying to build a relationship, or I'm trying to understand another person, what another person is going through, then if I'm strictly rational or strictly logical, it doesn't work. Um, Ladies, whenever you talk to your boyfriend or your partner and they try to solve your problem, how does that make you feel? Probably like they don't even care and that they're not listening, right? Like you talk about what happened. Stephanie in HR said this, and I can't believe that Stephanie did that. And your partner looks at you and goes, "Well, did you think about talking to your supervisor? I mean, really, you should just blah 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 blah." And you don't need someone to solve your problem. You need someone to sit with you emotionally, right? So rational mind is basically Dr. Spock. Everything is very rigid, everything is very structured, everything is logical, everything is practical. Our emotional mind is just all over the place. It is white hot rage, right? White hot intensity. Both of those have their advantages and disadvantages. Both of those can be useful. But what we want to try to find is wise mind. Okay. And wise mind strikes a balance between our rational and our emotional mind. We honor and nurture the emotional parts of ourselves while still trying to act rationally. So one of the things that was really difficult for me back in my late teens, early 20s was when I would text to date someone. So I would do this thing where I would send a text, she would send a text. I would send a text, she would send a text. I would send a text, she would send a text. I would send a text. Why didn't you text me back? Well, I've blown it. Everything, so then I would send another text and I would say, "Hey, I'm really sorry for that last thing. Ha ha, I was just kidding." Or blah, blah, blah. "Oh, sorry if I'm over, sorry." Jordan, I was taking a nap, or I was eating with my family, or I was doing something else other than being here to text you. And so my emotional mind would take off and go, "Oh, I've messed it up." But rationally, there were other things going on. So wise mind would be able to say, "I feel really uncomfortable that she hasn't texted me back. And most likely she is doing something else right now, and that's okay." Or, "I'm really upset that I didn't get a response. Like this is stirring up some fear in me, and I know that I will be okay regardless." Okay. So notice I said, and connecting those two thoughts, because that's what we do with DBT is you're connecting two thoughts. We don't want to do but, because but invalidates. So if you've ever had somebody tell you, "I love you," but you don't hear the "I love you." You hear everything that comes after that, right? And that's the thing that sinks into with us. So we don't want to cancel out that thing because it's important. So we connect these two thoughts. Okay. So we're going to go through just some skill building stuff. So really, we're promoting the acceptance towards change through these 4 different tenets, right? Mindfulness. We're not really looking to do anything. One of the things that people can want to do is if I feel something that's uncomfortable, I want to do something with it because I don't like it. Well, mindfulness is just teaching us to sit with it. We don't have to do anything with it. When I feel an emotion, I don't have to do anything with it because emotions are temporary, right? Emotions, we will eventually have different emotions that come along. Yeah, it doesn't mean that the emotion that we're feeling feels good, but it is going to go away. So do we allow ourselves enough time to let that emotion pass? And that is just kind of sitting with whatever we're feeling and noticing that, as opposed to noticing it and then wanting to do something with it. Emotional regulation. We're going to understand and reduce the vulnerability and then change unwanted emotions. So, redirects. So, oftentimes when someone feels fear or helplessness or anxiety, okay, I'm feeling this anxiety. How can I translate that into effective change? What can I do with that? What is it signaling to me? And how can I be proactive in trying to handle it? Learning how to deal with distress. So, getting through crisis situations without making things worse. In my personally, but also more importantly, professionally, I don't talk about self sabotage. You're going to hear that term a lot if you haven't already, that a patient self sabotages, especially when it comes to substance use disorder. I don't use that terminology. What I say is seek safety. Okay. So when someone does what we think would be self sabotage, what they're actually doing is seeking a state for themselves that feels safer than the one that they're in now, or that is more soothing. So if someone is going through like a very heavily emotional moment and they decide to go drink, it isn't that they're self-sabotaging, it's that the state of being that they're in while they're intoxicated feels safer than the emotional distress that they're feeling at the moment. If they're experiencing PTSD or they're going through like a something from their history, so like a sexual abuse, a sexual assault, feeling all of that and re-experiencing all of that feels really overwhelming. So we can say, oh, okay, they go and use heroin, or they go and use cocaine, or they go and use a substance as a coping strategy, which is mostly true, but they're also self-sabotaging. No, they're not. They're seeking a state of being that is safer than the one that they're in right now. And so that is what we learn with distress tolerance is, rather than going to these other things that can lead to negative consequences or a negative result, how can I sit with this distress without making things worse? How can I accept things for where they're at rather than trying to do something to make them better, but actually paradoxically making them worse? Okay. And then also interpersonal effectiveness. So, one of the things, especially with DBT, is it's working on the relationships that we develop with others and also with ourselves, but mostly with others. We see this most effectively working with people who struggle with borderline personality disorder, which you'll probably see a lot of if you work in substance use. That's a co-occurring, that's pretty prevalent. And part of borderline personality disorder is a struggle with establishing and maintaining healthy relationships with someone. And mostly because they don't know how to like advocate for themselves to get their needs met, and they don't know how to sit with things when they don't get their needs met right away. And so it turns into this big blah, because the blah has historically led them to getting their needs met, but it also makes things to where people don't want to continue relationships with them because of the toxicity and the intensity people aren't always ready for. Okay. Some other skill building things that we use are accepts. So these are 7 things that someone can do to try to help get through whatever they're feeling. So engage in activities, contributing to somebody else's life. Oftentimes, whatever somebody is going through, there's a worse period that they can reflect back on and see that they've gotten through it. I like to say you have survived you have survived 100% of your worst days, because we can look back and go, oh, that was the worst day of my life until now. Well, I got through that worst day of my life. So how can I use those skills now? Trying to generate different emotions or opposite emotions. So oftentimes if I work with a patient and they're feeling abandonment, rather than sit with that, what if they did the opposite emotion? An opposite emotion is a DBT skill where if I'm feeling abandoned, how can I put energy into finding connection? Right? Sometimes we like to sit and stew on whatever we're feeling. What if we took that and turned it into action? Okay. Um, Pushing away, so in other words, compartmentalizing, so taking this emotion and just kind of putting it on a shelf. We're not ignoring it because we have to make space for it on our little shelf, but can we keep it in a container and for later use? Thoughts, so engaging in thoughts that compete with the present ones, so again, that kind of opposite action type of thing. And then sensation, so grounding sensations. There's also something to be said for when someone experiences a big emotional something, like putting their hand in ice cold water to experience that sensation, or taking like a hot compress and putting it on their face and really feeling that helps to kind of ground someone. Can be really healthy and can be very beneficial. In terms of building relationships, we talk about dear mans. This is a skill that we kind of go through if people are finding that they're having a hard time getting their needs met. So when we do a dear man, we will, everything as you have experienced is an acronym. So let's describe the situation. We're going to just stick to the facts. What happened? Not how it made you feel, not how you reacted to it, but what are the actual facts of the situation? Okay. Breaking that down, expressing their feeling, because a lot of times what happens is that people, we get into being mind readers. Okay. People that really struggle in this space, have a hard time expressing what they actually need and communicating that to someone else. Okay. Asserting what they're feeling, reinforcing what is the benefit or what am I looking for out of this particular behavior, being mindful and staying mindful, being confident, because sometimes people will have a hard time being confident in that space, and then also being willing to negotiate. Oftentimes it's black and white. Well, it can't, sometimes with getting our needs met, it's not always going to be black and white. So that's really, really important. Okay. Again, other skills, give and fast, right? Fair, don't over apologize, right? We don't have to apologize for being alive. We don't have to apologize for asking for things. We are allowed to ask for things. Stick to values, be truthful, right? And then also giving, be gentle, interested, validate, and have an easy manner about yourself. And that can help to build relationships, which a lot of times people want. Okay. How does this impact substance use disorder? Distress tolerance is key. Oftentimes we talk about, if you have not heard, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT. Those are typical feelings that are associated, that are precursors for someone using. So if I feel hungry, if I feel angry, if I feel lonely, or if I feel tired, oftentimes in order to alleviate those, substance use can happen. Okay. Learning how to tolerate that distress is really important. I'm seeing it more frequently, especially in younger generations. Being able to sit with boredom is really hard. And so it turns into, I need some kind of stimulation, and stimulants and substance use can follow. Improving overall mindfulness, and then also assisting with, making those connections as we talked about. Now, let's talk about motivational interviewing, switching gears. So motivational interviewing is looking for change talk. Okay. There are 6 stages, really 5, but we'll talk about the 6th one as well. The first one that we're going to look at is pre-contemplation. Quite frankly, if somebody is in pre-contemplation phase, there's really not a lot that you can do to intervene. Okay. If you're seeing a problem and they're saying there's not a problem and they don't know why anybody cares about their problem, then you may not be able to do a whole lot in that space. As I have trained peer supports, as I have trained case managers, therapists tend to be pretty good about this because of our training, but case managers and peer supports can sometimes struggle in this area that, well, they just don't want to make a change. Well, or they're just not ready. They're not ready. They got to hit rock bottom. Well, not necessarily. If somebody's in pre-contemplation, they don't see that anything's wrong. And despite, we just got to say the right things, or they got to get in meetings and they got to just realize that that's not always going to work. And that's not always the approach to take. Oftentimes in that space, if somebody's in pre-contemplation, there's really just not a whole lot that you can do other than keep trying to raise awareness that there might be a problem here, right? We've got to force them into be able to seeing what's wrong. You may not be able to, because they may not even think that there's a problem, and all of your attempts to try to drive them towards engaging in treatment actually might push them away. Okay. So we don't want to approach it with judgment. We want to approach it with an open mind and understanding and meeting them in that space. If they're in pre contemplation mode, fine. They don't think they have a problem, fine. Let's just raise awareness. I'd see this happen a lot with teenagers, especially if they're smoking weed or using dabs, as Braxton was a few weeks ago. Um, Sometimes it's just about raising awareness. So when I would get a parent who would say, you got to talk to my teen-year-old about their marijuana use and you got to make them want to get treatment. Well, when I would meet with them, they didn't think there was a problem. They thought that mom and dad were on their back and they just want to have fun with their friends and blah, 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 blah. And if I try to fight that and go, well, actually, then I'm just going to push them away even further. So some of it is sitting with them in whatever space that they're in and just raising awareness. So I would talk to them about the 4 things about marijuana use that we know and just kind of educate them. And sometimes they would take that bait and go, well, okay, yeah, maybe I do have a little bit. Wow, I didn't realize that. That's wild. Because they have their talking points, right? It's not going to kill you. It's never killed anybody. It's not that bad. It's, they have their talking points. And so you may not be able to fight that. But what you can do is meet with them empathetically, hold space for whatever they are, wherever they're at, and then move from there. Okay. So you've raised awareness. Now what do we do? Well, now we're in contemplation mode. Okay. Maybe there's change talk. Okay. Wow. I might want to consider quitting. Okay, cool. So based on the definition, here's the possibility of change, but I just don't really know. I mean, what could I even do? Okay. So they're very ambivalent for treatment. Maybe I need to change, but I don't know what to do. All right, well, what would change look like? What would effective change look like? What would you like to see different? And that can move them into the determination phase, which is, okay, I think there may be something that I can do here. And so as we're in determination phase, the goal is to just build resources. So what are the different things that I could be able to do? Maybe I go to meetings. Maybe I get connected to treatment. Maybe I meet with a therapist. Maybe I try medication assisted treatment. Maybe I go to rehab. Maybe maybe I move out of my apartment where my family uses, and that's really triggering for me. Et cetera, et cetera. We're just building and consolidating a lot of the different things that someone can do to then move. And we're trying a bunch of different things to then move towards action. And so action is I'm taking the steps, but it isn't necessarily stable. So with determination, I've decided I'm going to try this treatment. Here are all my options. Action is I'm doing a bunch of stuff to see what works. Okay, so maybe in determination, I've taken 10 or 15. Now I've whittled it down to like 7 or 8 that I'm actually doing. And then that would move us into maintenance, which is I found the 2 or 3 things that really work for me. Okay, so I come see my therapist once a month. I get my medication assisted treatment every 2 weeks. And I go to my support groups 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm able to stop. I'm not using the triggers. I've got coping skills for them. I've got resources. I found the thing that works. I'm in maintenance phase and that feels good. Okay. So at maintenance, people can get out of this cycle and kind of just live life, whatever it is, or there's a recurrence, relapse, however you want to look at it, and the cycle starts over. Now, it doesn't mean that we go from recurrence back to pre-contemplation. I don't think there's a problem. It can be recurrence back to determination, and then we kind of come through here. It can be recurrence back to maintenance. Okay, I had a reoccurrence of use, and now I'm back to my maintenance thing. I got to get back on track. Okay, and that can restart that process. Okay, and then we kind of go back through. Cool, makes sense. All right. Fundamental principles. We're going to develop the discrepancy. You say you want this, but we're seeing this. Okay, you say that you're kind of ambivalent to treatment, yet you're also able to acknowledge that there's a lot of things going wrong. How do we navigate through there? These next two are connected: avoid argumentation and roll with resistance. If someone's coming in saying, I don't think there's a problem, the worst thing you can do is, yes, there is, you're just in denial. Because whenever we do that, that puts people on the back, like, I'm already defensive. Okay. So we don't want to argue. We just kind of want to roll with the resistance. Like, okay, cool. You're not ready for that. So what could we be ready for today? Is there something that we're ready for today? Is there a benefit to, discontinuing this use, to changing these behaviors? Being empathetic, boy, this is a lot. You're really going through a lot of change. It's hard. It's so hard. And then supporting their self-efficacy. You've had a struggle and that happens, but you've shown that you have the ability to do this kind of stuff, or this is really, really hard. What are some things that that you could be confident in being able to do, and exploring that space with them? Okay. Also, as we talked about with the ORs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflection, summaries. We talked about that with skill building and relationship building, the rapport building stuff back in like week 2 or 3. Some additional skills. So having some of these double-sided reflections. On one hand, this feels really comfortable, but on the other hand, you say that, you want to feel better. So how do we navigate through these spaces, right? Again, two thoughts being held in the same time. These are also called paradoxical reflections, which is like, well, you say this, but then, and you've also got this other thing. So how do we navigate through that? Emphasizing the personal choice, really just validating where they're at. It seems like these changes are important. What you'll do it when you're ready. What does readiness look like to you? Okay. Reflecting these feelings, it sounds like you're really confused about what to do next. What do you do with that? Okay. We can always ask for permission. It sounds like you're having trouble making a plan. Can I offer some suggestions, or would you be open to some suggestions? Because sometimes, and I've noticed this in my career, like I can jump into problem solving and they're not ready for that. So oftentimes I will offer it up, like, would you be open to some ideas? Okay. And then the open-ended question I talked about, and then normalizing, like, yeah, this takes some time. Like, acknowledge, normalize what's going on. Yes, this is a struggle, and that can help them to not feel like, oh my God. All right. So how does this impact substance use disorder? Motivational interviewing is great for change talk. I mean, that's really what motivational interviewing is designed to do, is really draw out change talk, discrepancies, helping them kind of see some of the inconsistencies that they're showing up with. Okay. And then also it's a good reminder that that the patient is the engine of the ship. Okay. That's the big thing. Reminding of them of personal choice that they have. Cool. All right. We will continue this discussion next week. Hope you have a great week. Happy first week of November. And we are definitely on the back end of all this. So finish strong. And as always, Canadian geese are definitive proof that evil exists. Live mahalo. I will see you next time. Bye.